The Boulton Paul Defiant was a single-engine, two-seater monoplane British interceptor aircraft developed in the late 1930s, distinguished by its unconventional turret-mounted armament. Unlike traditional fighters, it lacked forward-facing guns, instead relying on a powered dorsal turret housing 4 303 Browning machine guns, operated by a dedicated gunner. Initially, the Defiant performed well during the early stages of the Second World War, particularly in the Battle of France and early Battle of Britain, where German pilots misidentified it as a conventional fighter and fell victim to its unique design. However, as enemy tactics adapted, its limitations, a vulnerability to head-on attacks and a lack of forward armament, became apparent. Consequently, it was withdrawn from frontline daylight service and repurposed as a night fighter, where, as one of the first aircraft fitted with new secret airborne interception radar, it performed extremely effectively, albeit briefly, against German bombers. And then, in the end of its life, became the world's first electronic countermeasures aircraft. With 1,064 units built, it served with the Royal Air Force, and very briefly with the Royal Australian Air Force. In the 1930s, the Royal Air Force faced a strategic challenge. Advancements in aircraft design had produced multi-engine monoplane bombers capable of speeds surpassing those of existing single-engine biplane fighters. This disparity led to concerns about the UK's ability to defend its airspace against potential unescorted enemy bombers. To address this, the Air Ministry explored the concept of a turret-armed defensive fighter. This design would allow a pilot to focus on maneuvering the aircraft while a gunner operated a powered turret, theoretically enabling them to engage enemy bombers from various angles without the need for forward-firing guns. The idea culminated in Specification F935, issued by the Air Ministry on the 26th of June 1935, which called for a two-seat day and night turret fighter capable of 290 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. The specification emphasized a clean design, with armament concentrated in a power-operated turret, aiming for performance slightly below that of emerging single-seat fighters, but with sufficient fuel capacity for standing patrols. Several prominent aircraft manufacturers, including Hawker, Fairey, Supermarine, Gloucester, Armstrong Whitworth, and Boulton Paul, responded with submissions. Hawker's proposal, the Hotspur, was a derivative of their Henley design, modified to incorporate a Boulton Paul 4-gun turret. The Hotspur was quite attractive logistically, as it shared many components with the Hawker Hurricane, notably the outer wing panels, which would streamline production and maintenance processes. The Hotspur prototype, K8309, faced delays and did not take to the skies until the 14th of June, 1938, nearly a year after the Boulton Paul prototype. By this time, Hawker's production resources were heavily committed to the Hurricane, a single-seat monoplane fighter that had become a priority for the Royal Air Force due to the escalating threat of war. Consequently, the development and production of the Hotspur were deemed less critical, leading to the cancellation of its production order in 1938. The sole Hotspur prototype was relegated to experimental roles, including testing various flap and dive brake configurations, until it was ultimately scrapped in 1942. Boulton Paul, on the other hand, developed the P-82, specifically tailored to meet the turret fighter role, centered on utilizing their own manufactured powered turret, which was based on a French design licensed from Société d'Application des Machines Motrices. In October 1935, the Air Ministry placed orders for 2 prototypes each of the Hotspur and the Defiant. The Defiant's prototype, K8310, was clearly heavily influenced by contemporary British monoplane fighters, particularly the Hawker Hurricane, with which it shared certain aerodynamic characteristics. This would prove quite advantageous in the initial period of engagement with the Germans, who, thinking they were encountering hurricanes, would attack them from altitude and the rear, running into an unexpected hail of fire from its 4-gun turret. More on that later. The design was a 2-seater, low-wing cantilever monoplane fighter of all-metal construction with retractable tail-wheel-type landing gear powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin 3 engine, the first prototype was constructed at their Wolverhampton factory. K-8310 conducted its maiden flight 22 months after commission on the 11th of August, 1937, showcasing promising performance and handling characteristics. Sent to the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment at Martlesham Heath on the 7th of December, 1937, it underwent official ministry evaluation. Here the fuselage was fitted with aerodynamic fairings that helped mitigate the drag of the turret. Regardless, the weight and high degree of drag caused by the protruding section of the turret was to limit both the maneuverability and speed of the Defiant. Interestingly, it wasn't until February 1938 that the actual turret was fitted in K-8310, delaying testing further. But the Air Ministry didn't wait, with the pressing international escalations, especially the German Condor Legion carrying out the devastating aerial bombing of Guernica, the first large-scale bombings of a civilian population. It had already ordered 87 units of what was now designated the Defiant on the 28th of April 1937, soon raised to 450 units by May 1938. Regardless, due to the development delays, the first production Boulton Paul Defiant was flown 2 years, 3 months later, on the 30th of July 1939, with just 3 production aircraft reaching the RAF by the outbreak of the Second World War. The Defiant Mark I was 35 feet 4 inches long, 11 feet 4 inches tall, had a wingspan of 39 feet 4 inches, and a wing area of 250 square feet, powered by one Rolls-Royce Merlin 3 liquid-cooled V12 engine delivering 1,030 horsepower. It could reach a maximum speed of 304 miles per hour at 17,000 feet, with a cruise speed of 175 miles per hour at 15,000 feet and a range of 465 miles. Its service ceiling was 31,000 feet and could reach 15,000 feet in 8.5 minutes. Its distinctive armament was 4 303 Browning machine guns in the company's designed and built electro-hydraulic dorsal turrets. Electric motors located in the turret drove hydraulic pumps that powered hydraulic motors and rams. This was more effective than electric motors alone, and did not require hydraulic power developed by pumps on the aircraft's engines system utilized by the Nash and Thompson type turret. While lacking forward-facing fixed guns, the turrets had a full 360-degree traverse capability and could shoot forward, but only at an elevated angle to fire over the propellers safely. Interestingly, there was not enough room in the turret for the gunner to wear a seat type or backpack parachute. The parachute was stowed alongside the gunner instead. This made escape from the aircraft so difficult that gunners were later provided with a special all-in-one garment, a parasuit, nicknamed the Rhino suit. By the time the Mark I reached service, a request was already forwarded to increase its sluggish performance. In response, a pair of Defiant Mark Is were fitted with a more powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin 20 engine and featured changes such as an improved rudder with a greater area, modifications to the fuel systems, engine cooling, and increased fuel capacity. These would become Defiant Mark II prototypes, with their first flight occurring on the 20th of July 1940, just 11 months after the Mark I was delivered, and by August 1941, the Defiant Mark II had supplanted the Mark I. The Mark II's new engines achieved modest performance improvements, a top speed increase of just 9 miles per hour, and a range increase of 15 miles. But its real significant improvement was the inclusion of the new and highly secret aircraft interception Mark IV radar. More on that later. Number 264 Squadron was the first Royal Air Force unit to be equipped with the Boulton Paul Defiant, receiving its first aircraft on the 8th of December 1939, followed by 141 Squadron. Both squadrons had been disbanded in 1919 after World War I, but reformed in response to Britain's growing aircraft fleet as it prepared for what seemed inevitable conflict in Europe. pressed into service as a daytime fighter, in spring of 1940, RAF Fighter Command was mobilizing its forces in anticipation of increased German aerial activity. 264 Squadron was moved to RAF Duxford, a key airfield in southern England. Just 2 days later, on the 12th of May 1940, its Defiants were sent into action over the Netherlands, marking their first combat engagement of the war. This initial engagement involved 6 Defiants operating alongside 6 Supermarine Spitfires from 66 Squadron. Their mission was to provide air cover and counter German aerial movements over the Netherlands, which was under heavy attack from the Luftwaffe as part of the broader German Blitzkrieg offensive in Western Europe. The engagement demonstrated the Defiant's considerable ability to attack enemy bombers from below with effect, but it also exposed its vulnerability to enemy fighters, a weakness that would become increasingly apparent and exploited by the German pilots in the weeks that followed. Indeed, just the following day, in a patrol that was a repetition of the first, Defiants claimed 4 Junkers Stuka dive bombers, but were subsequently attacked by a flight of Bf-109Es. The escorting Spitfires were unable to prevent 5 of the 6 Defiants from being shot down by frontal attacks. Utilized in the evacuation of British forces at Dunkirk in late May to early June 1940, they again suffered against the German 109s who exploited the Defiant's weakness. 264 Squadron had some success with a Loufbury Circle tactic. 10 Defiants were attacked by approximately 30 Bf-109s, forming an ever-descending circle to prevent attacks from below. While providing each cover, they claimed 6 German fighters for the loss of just 3 Defiants. Nevertheless, the losses of Defiants was high overall, with 14 aircraft lost between the 2 squadrons of 12. Still, with the defence of British airspace becoming ever more desperate, by now 4 Defiant squadrons went head-to-head with German forces as the Battle of Britain unfolded in 1940. In 20 days of frontline service through July and August, 141 and 264 Squadron shot down 25 German aircraft for the further loss of 17 Defiants. Even with a top cover of Hurricanes or Spitfires, so it could concentrate on shooting down bombers, it was just too susceptible to the 109s, whose head-on attack tactics proved devastatingly effective. Finally, as the vulnerability of the Defiant in open daylight skies was undeniable, the decision was made to switch the type to night operations, and there the Defiant began to fulfill the role of night fighter. On the 1st of July 1940, 141 Squadron dispatched the first Defiant night patrol. Early successes were rare, having only the assistance of the ground spotlights to seek its bomber prey. These cat's eyes operations offered little in deterring the German blitz, but the 4 Defiant-equipped squadrons were responsible for shooting down more enemy aircraft than any other type in the period. In an interesting historical tidbit, Hugh Stuffy Dowding, Air Chief Marshal of the RAF at the time, was a huge proponent of aircraft interception radar, having stood his ground against the Night Defense Committee set up in desperation to curb the Blitz. For context, in September 1940, the Luftwaffe flew 6,135 night sorties, suffering only 4 combat losses. Dowding's rejection of the Night Defense Committee's recommendation and his insistence on waiting for AI radar led directly to his dismissal on the 24th of November, 1940. Alas, by the time the AI radar emerged, the Defiant was being replaced by the Bristol Beaufighters. Even Squadron 264, which in September 1941 received the Defiant Mark IIs kitted with AI Mark IV radar, used them for just 8 months until in May 1942, when they were replaced by the de Havilland Mosquito. Over 200 Mark IIs were built, although many were converted to target tugs later on. Some were designated the Mark III built, as dedicated turretless high-speed target tugs. Perhaps unsure what else to do with it, the RAF used Defiants for air-sea rescue, carrying air-dropped dinghies. But proving ill-suited for the task, by the end of 1942, the Defiant had been phased out of the air-sea rescue role. But it was with number 515 Squadron that the Boulton Paul Defiant would achieve the feat of becoming not only the RAF's first electronic countermeasures aircraft, but the world's first. It would be equipped with either Mandrel, which jammed the German early warning radar known as Freya, or moonshine equipment. This made a raid appear on German radar larger than it really was. It was in the ECM role that on the 17th of July 1943, the Defiants from 515 Squadron flew the type's final operational sortie of the Defiant before they too were re-equipped with the Beaufighter. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and drop a comment below. If you would like to see more like this, please subscribe to the channel.